Hello, my name is Michelle Caruso. Welcome to my channel where you get connected and thrive in the film industry. If you're new here, please be sure to subscribe. Please welcome my friend and colleague Sedrick, who has worked in the set deck department. He has worked mainly as a set dresser and on-set dresser. He's also an Atlanta local writer and director.
My name is Sedrick Lakpa, and I'm a set dresser, and I've been working in the film industry, since 2007.
Awesome. And were you already living in Atlanta or did you move to Atlanta, and how was that
Yeah,
transition?
I was already living in Atlanta. I graduated college from here, so it was when I started in the industry. There wasn't much going on, and I had to sort of make this decision on whether I was going to try to follow the industry in California or stay here in um, through just talking to people. It seemed like a better idea to start somewhere where it was small, build experience and a name for myself before I went and jumped into an area where, no one knows me and I don't have any skill to prove who I was or how I could, showcase my talent.
So with that, was your degree in college specifically geared towards film? Like, is film where you knew you wanted to be?
Yeah, my degree in college was film studies. So it wasn't film production. And funny enough, after I graduated college, they started a film production course. And I was like, really? Like after I graduate? I was able to kind of stay in touch with some of the students there and help them out on their projects in film production and just network from there with smaller projects, helping out for free at times, just trying to get my feet wet and find my, I guess, lane in the film industry. Because you know, with what I wanted to do, and being a writer director, I felt like, all right, so I may not be able to afford to go to a school specific for that, but this is kind of where I went was Emory University, and I was like, well, they do have a film studies program, so maybe if I'm learning the history and stuff like that, I can use that knowledge to help navigate me and then I could sort of learn along the way and learn instead of paying someone to teach me once I graduated or in a school, I would be getting paid to learn it um, on site on productions and stuff like that. So I did it that way, and I felt like that was really helpful for me in moving and learning more about the film industry and the craft of self dressing and the craft of filmmaking in general.
We're in the same boat of where we have like a larger goal within the film industry. Like, we do one thing for quote unquote the money right now, and also the
Yeah.
experience but ultimately we both, want to write and direct. So my question to you, going back to school, is like, how do you feel school has prepared you or not prepared you? How does it line up with where you've landed as a set dresser, and then how has it helped or not with writing and directing what you learned in school?
What I learned in school kind of gave me a base of what's been done in the past, technical wise, theory wise. Because I mean, obviously, a movie is beyond just putting actors in front of a camera. Your whole meaning on why you're creating this film. So, learning the history of who's done it, how they've worked, was super helpful for understanding what things are happening on set and why they're doing them that way. Because you realize that those conversations are had between the director and their director of photography, so that you're like, oh, well, why did they put the camera over here and why did they do this, and like you're like, oh, they're trying to honor this sort of technique that was really popular in this particular film, or this is their style, like, oh, this is Spike Lee style or Michael Mann style, or even older, like, just understanding the history obviously navigate helps you navigate the future and how you want to build upon it or navigate from it, or just anything in that way. And I felt like learning those things was really important for me. The only thing I felt like school, at least film studies wise, wasn't good on, it was giving me time to create a reel and really practice the craft. So what I ended up doing was trying to create projects on my own, and that's super good because you have to be a self-starter to do that. And you need that because not everyone comes with, uh, the knowledge or money to create a project and the resources to do that. So being a self-starter is super helpful. Yeah, that's one thing I wish I had was more time to kind of have created a portfolio and like really refine that craft of directing. But I'm slowly doing that outside of working on films for a job as a set dresser. And it's fun. So you have to squeeze it in. Like, all right, I got this weekend. Like, we got these people together. Hopefully, everything goes right. And sometimes things don't. And that's what happens on film sets.
Yeah.
And you have to learn how to pivot and learn how to adapt. Because you may have lined up everything beforehand, and things just happen, and that's life. And I think that's a really important lesson is being able to adapt. You may have a camera package not show up on time. And you're like, well, I've already paid for actors to be here, paid for everyone else to be here, and I really need things to happen. And you have to just really pivot to make it happen. So
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think that comes into, how do you navigate when something may look like it's your fault and it's like, dude, I have no control over this. And I feel like that's something that's challenging, when you're taking on your own project of like, especially like on the, producer production side of it, like, with, my last project, like I had to recast due to different reasons, like a lot of two major, actors, I think either that week or 2 weeks before, like very, very quick turnaround. And then it caused people to just like question, like, oh, is this going to happen? It's like, yes, it
oh
is. But
yeah.
it's like, there's just certain elements that are out of your control. So I wonder if you can speak to that a bit of, and then too, when you're talking about, creating a reel, like that's something that I was grateful for, that I got a little bit in my college between like networking, building a bit of a tribe. And
Hmm.
I went to school in South Carolina, I feel like since I didn't stay in South Carolina, I had to find a new tribe when I came to Georgia, which is challenging. But to this day, like I still keep in touch with a lot of people from South Carolina. We're just, in kind of like parallel paths of it. So yeah, it's like, and then sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I also like did a talk at the college, and some of the I say the kids, the students, um, were, they want to make something really good out of the gate, but it's like, be graceful with the process of like, I'm not saying it's impossible to make, for your first film to not be phenomenal. But I would say it's a little unlikely. And then with the, constraints of school, they're like, well, I'm working with people I wouldn't normally want to work with. And I would say that's definitely true in the professional world of like, and what is nice about, doing our own kind of smaller projects is we have a bit more control over that. So it's like, well, just get to, do your projects outside of the classroom to where you have more freedom to do that. So anyways, I know that was a lot of like going off into tangents, but I'm curious to hear, what advice do you have for, filmmakers that really want to make something great, you know, also accepting that there's a lot of things that aren't in your control, and when those circumstances happen, how do you deal with it and move everyone forward with it? Um, let's start there. How do you deal
Yeah.
with those
I would
elements?
say um, in doing that, you just want to be adaptable and being able to take certain things that may go wrong. Like I had a project I was gonna do this music video. This artist I like. Actually, I didn't have his. It wasn't sanctioned or anything. Like I just literally just asked him. I was like, "Hey man, I really like this song of yours. I'd like to make a music video." He's like, "Go ahead." So and he's an artist in which he just sort of produces music. He doesn't actually he doesn't use his voice or anything like that. He actually just like mixes music and makes sort of these songs out of kind of chopping and like I don't say recycling, but sampling old soul songs with a new sort of hip hop beat, but they feel like these like they feel like a really old song. It's really weird and it's really cool. So that's why I kind of jumped on trying to make this music video, and I'd written out the storyboard for it and got the storyboard. I've thought about this for so long, got everything together. I'm casting, and like literally the day before, the actress was like, "I'm sorry, I can't do it." I was like, so I had to scramble to find a new actress to make this music video, and I made it. You know, and we scrambled that day. We had some technical issues with the drone we rented, and we were losing daylight. And what I learned from that project was that like make it, make your film. You know, uh, push through it, obviously safely, but those things that happen that don't line up force you to be creative. You know, and then from there you can sort of add to um your repertoire. Like, all right, you make that film, okay, let's make another one. We've learned lessons from that one and what went wrong and how to be better. So sort of this trial and error that you really do have to go through. You may think that like if you throw enough money at it, you can just make this thing and it'll be perfect and ideal, and there is no perfect project. There's always things that you're going to want to do better or want to do different. I say go for it and do that for the next project, at least get it done. Because what can happen is that you get so, and I have been so tied to this vision on how you want it to feel and look and everything that you may not even finish it.
Oh,
You're like, well, I'm just
yeah.
gonna, I'm gonna wait for this to give, and I'm gonna wait for to give money, and then it's like you'll wait forever because other things may happen. And what you should do is just finish it as much as you can, move on to the next project. You can do bigger and better things to be creative upon that, to know how you want it, what you should have done, what you should have asked for,
Mm.
and that's something I learned, for is like what I should have asked for, or what I should have really communicated to my you know DP, like, hey, this is the look I'm going for. Because sometimes you may have a conversation and he has his own interpretation of what you're saying, and like I realized that I needed to create pictures. Like I needed to like show this is exactly what I want this person in the foreground, this person in the background. I want the focus to be here and everything else I focus there. And like literally having those specific conversations and then fighting for that in the moment, because sometimes you may feel rushed while on set to just accomplish a shot, but ask for what you want then, so you can get. And then obviously, you're gonna have a wish list of things you want, and be flexible with that, because you may not get everything you want while you're filming. And hopefully you've communicated that with your camera person or your DP, so that I need these things, and then you obviously have your wish list of everything else that you would like to have also.
Absolutely. And I just want to add too, when you were, discussing, talking with your DP of having like a visual example, um, something that I've kind of learned to do is for them to relay back what you're
Oh
saying
yeah.
so you can see if you're on the same page.
Hmm.
Um, and then I think, the thing that's one of the most challenging things about directing is you have to talk differently based on who you're talking to. Like whether
Definitely.
it's an actor or DP or sound, and and I feel like the time pressure, I had to like take a step back to just
Yeah, because you're switching modes,
yeah.
So it's like, okay, all right, I'm talking to the actor, like, let me get into that mode in which we can be creative and they can be vulnerable with me in this moment, so I can get them to this space. And then, sound guy be like, hey, I need you to put the microphone right there because I need to hear this. This is exactly like, they're different departments, different skill levels, different crafts require different types of communication. And you as a director, or we as directors, have to understand when and how to use that. You can't just use the hammer for every nail, like you
Right.
really. And because I've seen that happen. I've seen people just talk however kind of way to people, and it's like, yeah, like that's not going to get you what you want. You're just going to piss people off, and they're just going to be nonchalant about helping you achieve your vision, you know?
Yeah. That's a really great point of like how you communicate dictates a lot of the mood on set, and not just yourself, but others. So it's
Yeah.
like if someone else is like affecting the mood on set, and specifically actors, you know, because some people are having to be, you know, hand to hand contact with actors, and it's like if they're you know, spreading seeds, and it's like, whoa, whoa, like
Yeah.
yeah, it's just interesting of, you know, how, yeah, I feel like as a director, and, you know, everyone has a responsibility to it, but like facilitating that mood on set, I think is so important in protecting everyone's creativity.
Definitely.
Let's get back to set deck a little bit of
Okay.
what types of roles have you had in set deck, and what were your path to these roles?
I have done, as a set dresser, I have been an on-set dresser on Vampire Diaries. I have worked in the warehouse. If you're not familiar with set dressing, usually you have a warehouse that you house all of your set dressing in, and that warehouse person organizes and cleans, repairs, or builds set dressing so that it is prepared to be loaded into a truck later. Smaller shows may not have a person that works in a warehouse. Bigger shows usually do, because um, there's so much to do that you need someone while people are working on the actual set to kind of prepare those things for the next day. Back in the day, it's so weird to say that. Um, there was enough time in which the same people who worked on the set used to come back and prepare for the next day. Now, usually, there's been a movement to having someone work in the warehouse to prepare the next day, because the types of shows that are being made a lot bigger, and the quality that they want requires a lot more set dressing, like Ozark or something like that. It's not like, oh, okay, they're going to be shooting in a room. It's like, oh, they're going to be shooting in the market, and they want 10 booths. They want each booth to have its own things, and like the buyers have, you've got three different buyers, and they've gone on and bought $10,000 worth of stuff. Just saying, and it all needs to be organized per. So like, you need someone there to sort of organize that, and then sometimes you just need someone there because like something may be asked for on set, and instead of sending a person in a truck back, you already have someone there at the warehouse to look, say, hey, do we have a lamp that would be similar to this? Or do we have extra bed sheets for this? Or does there a rug? Where's the rug for this particular set? You know? So I've worked that position. I've worked, obviously, as a set dresser on films, from Tyler Perry's Medea's movies to Marvel's Infinity War, and Endgame, and all of those sort of require different responsibilities or different skill levels, and you get to learn. And sometimes you're in a group maybe dedicated to a certain set, depending on how big it is or how much detail it needs. But yeah, I've been a gang boss, and a gang boss within set deck also requires a lot of organization. So you're the go-between between your lead person, who is your, I guess, program manager, project manager, to your crew, and you're sort of facilitating those directives or instructions for your crew, because your lead person may be out on scouts looking at sets and things like that, but certain things need to happen on set, and he may communicate it to you, and then you communicate to the crew, and you're communicating between, you may have two crews or three crews, and you're sort of the go-between to make sure things are still going and things are getting accomplished. And you're kind of working with the crew, and doing the organizational stuff, as far as like making sure they have water or the tools they need, or whatever may be missing. Or sometimes it's going in between departments. As a gang boss, it's like, oh, it looks like paint hasn't arrived yet, they should be here, and you as a gang boss may let your lead man know, and then you may be a liaison to like, hey, I won't be able to go talk to them right now because I'm on another set as a lead person, and the gang boss may be able to communicate the information to another department, so that things can sort of keep going, and your crew isn't just sitting and waiting somewhere, or not knowledgeable about something. So yeah, I
Hmm.
sort of I've ran the gamut as far as in set deck, experiencing most of it or all of it, from being a set dresser, a gang boss, or a warehouse person. Um,
Can
yeah,
you go into a bit on what it's like to be the onset dresser?
being the onset dresser is, let's see, fun because you're right next to the action. Like you're really there helping maintain the continuity of what's happening, and what happens in between scenes. Um, it can be a little stressful because you're the only person in your department there fighting for your department. Build a good relationship with your first AD, with your director of photography, and your grips, because they are all going to be very supportive of you accomplishing your job. Because when they need to move the camera and you need to clear a whole side of a room, you may not be able to move a couch by yourself. So if you have a working relationship with other departments, they may be able to assist you on something to help move it quickly. But they also need to understand that relationship, that anything that needs to be moved, you need to be notified first before people just start grabbing things and start moving them, and because of that can kind of happen. But it's really fun because you're right there and you can really see how the director works, and you can sort of help maintain what the look of the scene. You know, you're replacing the lamp that fell down, or whatever it may be, and you're really there, hands on deck, um, for the scene, and helping maintain the look that the decorator and production designer have created. And that's really fun and really engaging. And you know, sometimes you can get a really good working relationship with the actor and the director, as a, you know, it's like, all right, we're going to do this thing, can you make sure that this thing moves, or this thing stays in this place for this scene? Or you're working with the operator, camera operator, and he sees something that is not consistent. He's like, hey, did you see that thing in the background? Let's make sure that, you know, either it stays there to maintain the continuity, or that, you know, it wasn't there before. Can you make sure? And so that, like, having that working relationship with the other crew members really is helpful as an onset dresser. And it can be really fun, you know, and exciting, because you're, like I said, you're right there with everything happening.
And with that, can you speak to just explain a little bit more about what we mean by continuity?
So yes, continuity is basically keeping things in place. I think most people have sort of at least experienced watching something on film. If something doesn't stay in its place, like someone, let's say, during a fight scene, and the curtain gets knocked down, and then the next scene the curtain is back up. You're like, well, how did it get back up during this fight scene? You know, and obviously these scenes get filmed in pieces, and certain things, if you're really on it, get replaced. And then maybe because of the speed of how things are going, how you're working, or maybe they're filming at 3 a.m. in the morning, you know, you may be, you know, like, hopefully you're really good at your craft, and you're really good at staying on top of maintaining the continuity, that you notice all the details within the frame and making sure those things stay consistent. It could be placement of a table, it could be placement of a light, if it's too high or too low, did it get knocked down? You know, it's like all those things show up in the editing booth, or even in the final product sometimes. And hopefully you've done your job, and those things stay continuous to keep the viewer in the space that this story is happening.
Whether they notice it consciously or not, there's just something a little jarring sometimes when that happens. Part of that is taking photos.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry, I guess I didn't explain that part too. Oh yeah, as part of being an onset dresser, you do, to help yourself, what you do is, uh, what I like to do is I would show up to set early, and I would take photos of the entire set, so that I know what to replace and how it looked before anyone got there. Because as soon as people get there, people are standing in the way, they've got their coffees, they're like talking about the scene, and then you don't have a chance to get a good glimpse of what was there before people start moving. Because people get there, they're, all right, let's start laying the camera track, you know. So taking photos, taking notes, is super important.
yeah, and like as you know, an art department coordinator, I've seen lots of different types of photo taking. So I
Oh
try to
yeah.
like get it on the front end too of like hey, when you send me because, it's not only for continuity, but for reshoot purposes, especially if it's a location that went through a drastic redressing, like it could have been a field and then all of a sudden we made it a farm or something. You got to think of it that way. So I say like go wide and then punch in,
And then
all the
punch in,
details. Yeah.
definitely. I've seen some really bad photo taking where people are just snapping and they don't hold the camera steady. If you need to use the flash, use the flash. Some people you forget to use that, and it's like this picture is completely dark. I can't tell what's in it, what's where, or the detail that's there. But taking the time to take a really good photo is super helpful because it helps everyone after you. Because sometimes,
Right.
well, most times, as an onset dresser, your photos may be used to reset for the next day. So if you didn't take good photos, then the set dressing crew that has to come back in to redress the set can't do it as well as they need to. So they have to call you or you know bother you when you're off in order to get everything ready so that it's ready by the time crew is ready to shoot again. And also a big thing for me is like reference in a photo, understanding reference point. Like if you're going to take something up close or up wide, like catch the edge of a door, because sometimes if you just take a picture of let's say a frame photo on the wall, is it in
What
the
wall
middle of
is
the
that?
wall or is it closer to the door? Like so, and like you said, a nice wide photo that gives some reference. Oh, okay, the window's on the left, the picture's closer to the window, and then this is there, or the couch is close. Like taking wide photos that have reference points in them. It could be literally just the edge of something. Like, oh, okay. So someone looking at the photo that's never been to the room can go,
Yeah.
oh, I know where this goes. This goes here. The bed goes there. This seems to be a little bit off the wall. And that sort of thing is super important. And then even just obviously close-up photos, but do your wides before you do your close-ups, because taking a picture of a candy dish with, you know, uh, on a dresser is like, well, oh, I see what's in the dish, but where is the dish on in the space in relation to everything else? So things I've learned as a set dresser, things I've learned are tying knots. So when I'm on the truck, being able to secure things in the truck so they don't break, and knowing how to secure them with protection. Protection being, if I have a really nice dresser, couch, or whatever piece of furniture, I need to protect it with a furniture blanket, and then also need to secure it to the truck so it doesn't tip over in transport. And knowing how to do that and learning how to do that, I is super important. And you should follow the guide of someone else who's done it before you um, just attempt it on your own. There are several set dressing classes that you can take, at least here in Atlanta, in which you can learn those sort of basics of how to tie things in a truck, how to pack a truck. You know, obviously you don't want to put fragile things or heavy things on top of something fragile. I mean, it sounds like common sense, but I've seen crazy situations where like, wow, this was done very poorly. um, so for at least a set dresser and picking things up, learning how to pack a truck, learning how to tie things off and tie certain types of knots that are secure but also easy to remove is super important. Knowing how to organize, super important, and knowing how to label, also super important. There can be so many moving parts, especially there's so many moving parts in a film in general. So within the department, there are also a lot of moving parts, and if certain things aren't labeled, it's hard to know what you're looking for, where it is in this huge space that you may be sent to look for it. So being able to label something, whether you're on a set and packing up someone's house to take things out, or you're taking something down or striking a set, which means taking it down and packing away and labeling it correctly. This is a roof set and it has the kitchen dishes from the left right cabinet. Like that sort of detail is super important, because when someone comes behind you, or people come behind you to look for something, it's a lot easier to know that, oh, it's probably in this box, as opposed to having searched the 150 boxes that are stacked in the warehouse. Like being able to pack a box is also super important to know as a set dresser. knowing that if you're putting dishes into a box, they need to be packed properly. They need to have some sort of packing material in the box. I've seen situations people are putting lamps into boxes and there's no bubble wrap or any sort of protective. And it's like, nope, this is wrong. So labeling, organizational skills, putting things back where they were when they were where they were taken from. Because when you have a lot of people working in a space and you've moved something to somewhere else to use it and you haven't put it back, and that was a simple thing, but when you're in the mix and things aren't in their place, it makes things super frustrating. And I'm sure it happens in an office too. If that's something relatable, you're like, oh, where the stapler was here and now it's not here. Now I have to go look for the stapler. So it
Oh,
happens.
absolutely. I'm bad with pen thieves. I literally keep pens in my desk because it's so easy for anyone to just come. And I'm bougie about my pens, right? So it's a pen that people want. So,
I have stolen a few pens, but I've brought them back. I've brought them
yeah.
back.
I'm very particular about the way I name files, the way I organize files, and the way my binders are, organized with paperwork. Because you're right, it's like you have to be able to simplify it in a way that anyone can understand it, because not everyone thinks the same way. So it's like, how do you create a structure and system that is easy to understand and not overwhelming, like you said, because packing up sets, that can easily be hundreds of boxes. So it's like, how do you narrow that search for somebody?
Yeah, if there's a reshoot and it's like, all right, we just need the dining room in this corner, like hopefully the box is labeled dining room and not just house. Because you're like, all the boxes are labeled the house. Well, which room? Like it needs to be sectioned off by room, or even shelves. Like, all right, you're taking things down off of a shelf. Things go into a box is labeled shelf number 1 or shelf A, top shelf, or A, B, and C, or like you have to create a system that someone else can come behind you and understand that system. And I think that's a skill you must learn for your, as far as working in set dressing. It needs to be self-explanatory. They should be able to walk into it and understand it easily, as opposed to like, this seems completely random and not organized or not labeled. Or organization goes across the board, whether you're a set dresser, whether you're an on-set dresser and taking photos, because not only do you take those photos, at night, you should be putting those photos into folders per episode or scene.
I can't tell you how often that does not happen.
Because sometimes people are just like, "Hey, I took photos," and it's like, you took 300, or not 300, let's say 100 photos, and they're from all the different scenes, and it's like, are they organized in any sort of way, or do I?
No.
And sometimes you may be the person who has to go through and organize them. And you weren't even there,
Exactly. Oh my God. Well, that's another thing that I kind of do in my little intro email to the onset dress of like, if you're not going to do that aspect of it, of organizing it, and not even on a daily basis, it's super rare for anyone to have done it on a daily basis. I'll maybe get a jump drive at the end of the week or even the month sometimes, or the episode. It's like
Wow,
at the
a month?
yeah. And it's like, regardless of how much I ask, so every now and then I'll pitch it up, but then I'll hear, well, they're too busy with other things. That's not a priority. It's like, I understand, but then don't come asking for me for photos because I've asked for them. Anyways, it's catch-22. The two things I ask for is like, I at least want to know the location, like what is the name of the set, and the scene number.
Hmm.
And that can be just like quickly taking a photo of the call sheet where it has like the scene heading and then the number, and then everything after that I know. So it's like, either go ahead and do the work of organizing it into the folders, or at least do that within your photos. But yeah, I'm so I'm so grateful to hear like an onset dresser that gets it. Like,
No, I totally get it, because when I first started, I worked in the art department, and you'd get these photos, and you're like, "Well, what's this?" It was just a thumb drive of photos. And like, all right, so I guess I'll organize it since you didn't.
yeah, and it's like, that's not technically my job. My job is to help archive and organize everything. So people like just pass off more of their work onto me, because I get that as an art coordinator, like I got to deal with everybody.
Hmm.
Um, like from production designers, graphic designers, decorators, buyers. So it's like every little thing that they don't do, and I'm just like the catch-all. So that's just, yeah, and then it's amazing to me when department heads don't recognize that. And it's like, for one thing, I don't want to be and don't care to be a snitch. Is like, I get everyone's busy, but it's almost
Yeah,
kind of
after a
disrespectful
while, it
my
becomes
time
like,
and my position.
yeah, I don't want to be looked about. You don't want to be looked upon like you're not doing your job because someone else is not doing their job. It's like, it's not
Yeah,
my fault. This person's not doing their job, so I can't do mine. It's
right.
like you would love to be on set and just take the photos yourself and organize them, but you can't. It's not your position. That
Right.
person should be organizing the photos or taking the photos and give some sort of organization to them.
And that's a good point. Yeah, when you dump it on someone else that doesn't have that frame of reference, oftentimes, things will get mislabeled. A big portion of how you can learn this skill is to work on reshoots and see what was the existing
Oh yeah,
structure.
yeah. Reshoots are great to learn. Like, oh wow, like this should have been done the first time correctly, as opposed to deciphering it. You know,
So it's like we all want to do a good job at the end of the day, and that comes from each person doing their job well.
yeah. Like I know an instance I've run into it. It's like you may take a photo, something may change. It changed, but you didn't retake the photo to clarify that to everyone else that may see the photos. Another good thing I was thinking about is just communication, it, on set or um, between your lead man or your decorator and production designer. It's just being able to text them and let them know or ask them a question as opposed to just making a decision on your own is super helpful. Have that
Absolutely.
relationship to where like, hey, do you want me to call you when something crazy may happen on set? They decided they don't want to use this piece that you bought. That's because I've seen that sort of come to head on set. Like, no, like the production designer wants this in the scene. And they're like, we don't need it. We don't need it. And you're like, they say they don't need it. And they're like, then that production designer calls like, no, we need it. He's like, oh, okay, guess we'll use it. And you're like, yes, I was trying to tell you that. You didn't believe me.
Right. So that's a great point. Like I got into that a little bit with like PAs of like what's routine versus what you have to figure out for yourself. So it's like
Mhm.
that sounds like another area where like the line's a little gray of like where do you make that call and where do you don't. And I think it comes down to communication and understanding that everyone works differently. So trying to figure out everyone's priorities and what they are going to dig their heels in at the start of the show is important to understand and figure out. I tried to emphasize, covering yourself on the forwards and back end as a common thing for our department, doing distro of plans. It's like we may have, our list of like, yes, this drawing went to these people, but then they'll claim that they never got the drawing. I like to have proof that they got the drawing. So it's like text them and have some way of proving, whether it's a picture of it in their inbox and then a text saying yes, got it, like just having that forward and backward communication. And then also telling your boss or the coordinator like, yes, that task is completed, and you can say with certainty that it's been executed to the fullest of your ability. Because since that more falls on the PA to do distro of drawings, I want to be able to, when those type of interactions happen where someone said they didn't get a drawing, the production designer is coming to me to say, did everyone get that drawing? And I can say with certainty, absolutely, versus if there's also like a trust gap between me and the PA, then I'm gonna have to say, oh, let me get back to you, let me just double check, versus if I know that PA has is
Yeah, done that
covering
job to the
themselves well,
T.
then I
Or
can say with full confidence, yes, they definitely got it. So
yeah, that happens in set dressing. I found that more prevalent as a gang boss because sometimes I'm talking to different department heads, and like, it was more so in situations where I knew something was supposed to happen a certain way as far as a schedule or like from the art director, okay, paint's supposed to be here this day, and then we're supposed to have this but this day, and this supposed to happen. And sometimes I may like overhear something from construction is like, yeah, we're not building that, or it's it sounds like wait, what? I need to send a text, make sure that I've sent this text to my person and they respond to me to understand. Like you need those sort of like you said, to cover yourself on communication, that it was said or what it was asked about, and that person either said yes, no, and that sort of thing, getting a response, and that back and forth communications. It's almost not enough to just like, well, I gave it to him. Like, no, you need to
Right.
give it to them. Hopefully you get a response back and then share that response. Because I've had that actually between props, like, hey, like we asked you about this thing 2 weeks ago. Here it is in a text. You said you didn't have it. We definitely didn't receive it. So where is it?
This is where I think each crew member needs to take initiative to tell the full story sometimes of, going back to destroying drawings as an example of, I'll be like, did you give it to this person? And then I find out, oh, well, I gave it to someone I didn't know the name of. And then they said they gave it to them. I'm like,
Oh
that's
yeah.
not the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing. Got to follow up with that,
Follow up.
sort of thing. And even as a game boss, sometimes something's given to me. Say, hey, this needs to be taken to paint. You put it in their space. No one else knew about it. It was placed there. It's been there for a week, ready to get painted. No one knew.
No,
No one knew it was
yeah.
there, and no one knew what color or what it was supposed to be painted. I've run into that a few times. You
Definitely.
know.
I think that's a very valid point of like, I can't tell you how many times, and paint is a great example where I brought something down to paint and they're like, I don't know anything about this. And it's frustrating, to me as a below the line crew member because I'll ask like whoever's giving it to me, I'm like, who do I give it to? And do they know what it's for? And oftentimes they'll say yes. And then I'll hand it to who it's got to go to. And then, say, hey, do you know what to do with it? And they're like, no. So I was like, okay, I'll have them call you. And then I'll make sure that that conversation happens. So yeah, it's very true of like, don't, just because you're told one thing, don't presume that's as
Right.
bad as it sounds. Don't presume it's the full truth, because I feel like anything I get my hands in, I want to make sure that the full plan is
Yeah,
being
absolutely.
executed.
Those miscommunications can add up to, some big setbacks, you know, and you want to limit that as much as possible. It's never going to be completely perfect, but we can try our hardest not for there to be setbacks because of lack of communication.
What are the primary responsibilities and expectations of being a set dresser?
Primary responsibilities and expectations. Okay. So expectation is to show up on time and be ready to work. One thing I like to emphasize with people that are just starting out in set tech is that if you don't understand something, ask. Nothing worse than like, you know, pretending that you know how to do something and you don't, and it takes you much longer because you are learning how to do it, or have to figure it out on the fly, which is fine, but let the person who gave you that task know, so they know what to expect. Because if I expect, hey, can you hang these 4 pictures, and I come back in 4 hours and one's hung, like I am not, you know your lead man and your decorator are not going to be happy with the work that's progressed if it's taking an exorbitant amount of time that they didn't expect it to take. um, so I would say ask, uh, to clarify what they're expecting from you and how they want it done, because some people are really particular, some people just want it done. That's just getting to know people and how they work, and how different people work in their different modes. How to tie things down on a truck, how to measure things is another big one. Using a tape measure, how to measure things, label things. That's another thing. How to label it. Using a piece of blue tape. Another thing to know is what to label and what not to label. As far as protecting certain things, like you want to make sure something is labeled and people know what it is, but You also want to protect the furniture or piece of art or whatever it is. So you don't want to put, if it's really fragile, to put some big blue tape on it that when it's peeled off, it takes off the paint or varnish. Put it in somewhere that's visible, but yet, you want to make sure that it's not something that's going to ruin or damage the item that you're trying to label, because then that defeats the purpose. If you need help with something, ask for it or use the proper equipment to move it in order not to damage it. This is union rules, obviously. When you start the day, you start at a certain time. 6 hours after your call time is when you should be taking lunch. I know it seems like a simple thing, but some people don't know it and they may get taken advantage of, because you should be taking lunch 6 hours after your call. If you're not, you should be notified beforehand. You should be asked if you would like to push lunch or take lunch. And you also should be asked on whether you're going to work late, beforehand, not at the last hour. If it's already at the 12-hour mark and it's like, all right, who can work late? Like that should be asked like a few hours before. Hopefully your lead person or gang boss should be gauging the time to know that, hey, like this is not going to get finished on time. Should we ask people to work late, or are we going to push it till tomorrow? Knowing those things help build a very safe environment, because otherwise you can get taken advantage of and overworked.
So with that, one thing that is good about, coordinator PA relationship is I'll take the initiative to, tell the production designer or art director, like, hey, we're about to go over 12 hours. Is that okay? Versus, set dressers that they may be the only ones on location. So it's like, where does that responsibility fall to ask? Because I feel like a lot of people, especially in this industry, don't want to show that they're unwilling to do the work simply by asking, like,
Yeah, I
standing
can see
up for
that.
themselves, like you said, with lunch, between lunch and like overtime of so the way I phrase it, even for just my own self, when I've hit, my 12-hour mark, I'll go to the art director, hey, do you need anything else? I'm packing up. Like, I'm curious how you can phrase it so that you show like, hey, I'm here if you need me, but if not, it's also time for me to go.
What I like to ask is, are we working over today? And I try to do that before it gets to our end of day. So like you should be walking out at the end of your day, not cleaning up at the end of your day. Like you should be working in a way that, all right, an hour before, is there things I should be preparing for the next day?
Mm.
And that's a good way to show that, hey, that whatever you've done is done. Are we working overtime? It's a way in which if you're preparing for the next day, you're obviously done with today's work. So you want to start doing that beforehand. It's like, hey, is there anything we can get prepped for tomorrow? So that, even if you don't get through everything that you're prepping for tomorrow, it's already begun. That work's already begun. So then when you start the next day, it's already started. And it also lets your boss know, hey, okay, looks like we're getting done because you're already prepping for the next day. So that's a question I like to ask: is, what can be prepped for the next day, and are we approved for overtime? Are we approved for overtime is the last thing you want to say. If you're already hitting that mark, we are at 12 hours, then it should be asked. And when I say 12 hours, I mean that. But your 12-hour day, say you start at 6, your 12-hour day ends at 6:30 because you've taken 30 minutes for lunch. So at 6:30, and everyone's still working, it should be asked, like, are we working overtime or are we ending the day? Protect yourself, protect others, and you're prepping for the next day, which is super important, so that the next morning you're not just hitting the road like, oh man, I should have done this yesterday. It's more like, okay, I'm taking it and starting my day. It's already ready to go.
That's a great point of like not only getting the timeline of like ask that question an hour ahead, but also uh, incorporating time into your end of your day for the next day, because that's a really valid point of like the mornings are always super brutal. So I love that forethought of what can we do now, because you 100% cannot presume you have no time in the morning.
Yeah, you can't presume that you'll have, the time to prep for the morning. Like if the set shoots the next day. It's like, can we start packing the truck so that in the morning it's getting in the truck and leaving, as opposed to, oh, now we have to collect everything for that set and put on the truck. Like, we should be preparing the truck the night before so
Hmm.
that it, and there might be some last minute things to put on in the morning, and that's fine. But you don't want to start with an empty truck when you should be leaving, because depending on what you're loading, that's an hour to 2 hours of packing. 2 hours being the most, but if you have enough people, it should be an hour to pack a truck, and that sort of thing carefully. But if you can save that hour, and you have, all you need is 15 minutes to put the last few minute items on and then head off the set. That's huge. That's an hour
Absolutely.
out of the day. You only have 12.
I
Well,
love that
only,
we
only
say we only have 12.
12. It should be less, because
Right.
there are definitely some moments where time is like not used very wisely, and I think
Absolutely not.
I think we can get our job done in 10. Truthfully,
I agree.
I would say one thing about tools as far as set deck. Some people feel like they need to show up with all their tools. As far as someone new to the set deck and as a set dresser, show up with a little bit, and then be observant of what people are using and what you need, and then build upon that. You don't necessarily need to show up with 3 cases of tools, because you're also moving those tools around yourself, or those tools are taking up space on the truck. I made a list for myself on what I thought I needed. I didn't just go out and buy indiscriminately. I'm gonna buy these tools in this big case and all this to bring the work. It's like, sometimes you need all that. Like, I'll have all that stuff and it sits in the corner, and all I've used for the day is my blue tape, my tape measure, my my permanent marker, and a knife all day. Maybe a hammer if I'm hanging nail. I'm hanging frames. You don't necessarily need to have every tool to be a set dresser. You need to figure out what's your skill set, what you feel comfortable with, what you need by seeing others and what they have, and slowly build what you need for your skill set.
Yeah, that's a great point of like, yeah, start small. Like, I think it goes into whenever someone is starting off with something new and even looking at it from a camera perspective, they're like, I need all these lenses. And it's like, do you even know what the difference is between all these lenses?
Yeah, no,
So
it
yeah,
can
I
be
think
it
that's
can
a
be
very
intimidating, because you may see someone who looks like, or who said they've been there for a while, and they have this big, huge tool case, all these different drawers on it, and you're like, man, I need to buy all this stuff, and it's like, no, get a little tool bag, what you need for set dressing. Um, what I carry on me, at least: blue tape, electrical tape, tape measure, a permanent marker, a knife.
Do you do a multi-tool?
I do a multi-tool, yeah. That's my knife. Sorry. Sometimes I have a straight blade, like a box cutter blade, and then I have a multi-tool that has pliers and that sort of thing. Scissors, maybe. But yeah, start off with that. Like, those items. You start off with those items, you're good. You're ready to go. Maybe a set of gloves, just in case. Some people like wearing gloves. Some people don't. I feel like that I have better control if I use my hands, and that gloves, sometimes I can't feel if something's slipping out, or I can feel it, but I don't have a grip to really hold on to something. So I have them just in case if I'm carrying something that's really disgusting, or you know I don't really want to touch it. But I like to use my hands. But in going back into work now, I feel like, especially with COVID and whatnot, I'll be using my gloves a lot more often.
What's possible protocols to returning to work? And of course, it's all speculation at this point. But yeah,
Yeah,
you
washing your hands is going to be a huge protocol.
know,
Sanitizing things and wiping them down. Because things change hands a lot of times before they make it to set or make it to the actor. And it's like, there'll be no way to trace who's touched this thing, how many people, like, how many hands have touched it. Because, I mean, it goes from construction to paint to set deck, whoever may have touched it to move it.
and you had a really great point too of like in the truck, it's like you can't socially distance in a truck. And how many set dressers? So it's the driver, and is it like two set dressers, or how many are in?
Depends. If it's a pickup, like if we're going to pick up furniture around town or something like that, usually it's 2. If it's something small, like I just need this in the truck to pick up this one item, it may be just a driver and one dresser. But most times, if it's, several pickups, what you have is two set dressers and you have your envelopes. That's another organizational part, is the envelopes. That's the
Oh
one thing we
yeah.
didn't discuss. So pickup envelopes are super important, that they have pictures in them. They have notes on the front of what you're picking up, what day you're supposed to be picking it up, who the contact person that you're picking it up from, because it may
And
be
is it
you're picking
paid
up.
for?
Yeah. And there are notes on there that you should follow, like make sure you get a receipt, and it's highlighted on the envelope. And it's like, oh, you didn't get the receipt? It says it on the envelope. Or, the cash or the check is in the envelope, a check before you go. It's like, oh, I got there, I don't have the check. I was like, yeah, because it says come to me to get the check.
Yep.
So envelopes is another organizational thing within SetDeck that is super important. And at this point, I feel like they should be digital,
Mm.
because looking through physical envelopes, I did as a warehouse person and as a gang boss, gets really, because depending on the show, you could be, I mean, we had maybe, I don't know, 400 envelopes, of,
Wow.
yeah, easily, just because some things were one off, of like, we're just ordering this one thing. And then some things were reoccurring, that we may strike a set and return those items, but we need that same envelope to pick up those items again. And you want to make sure that, oh, we're going to pick up those items again, or something may have been lost, and making sure that you've noted that Sedrick and whoever have picked up this item today on this date, signing your name on the envelope, to who picked it up, who returned it, because there may be a call from that vendor, that you picked up several items from, saying, hey, we're missing this one item. And if that's not noted on the envelope, it's like, it becomes a huge deal, and it maybe have to be paid for because it has been lost. But if you're like, hey, no, I returned it, I had them check off to make sure everything was returned, and they signed, and gave me an invoice slip or a return slip saying, yep, everything's good, we're good to go, then you're covered. But if you don't have those things, then you end up being responsible. Like, hey, this thing was not returned. You're like, nope, I took a picture of it, I returned it, or I took a picture of it and I picked it up. Stating that information clearly on the envelope, or making sure you read the envelope for all those details, is super important.
Reading those details and interpreting it. So like going back to like getting a receipt or payment, or checking the hours, because that can really affect the workflow of the day of, that's something that I've learned as I'm like coordinating with vendors of like, hey, what are your hours? Sometimes they have freaking weird hours, like 10
Oh
to
yeah.
4. And as a tech likes to start
11 to
early.
4. And you're like, 11 to 4?
Yeah,
Wow. And they're not open on Mondays.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, it's funny. So, yeah, it's like showing, how just covering yourself as much as possible. And a lot of that comes with experience. You learn from, mistakes like that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's like at least do your due diligence as much as you can. And then don't be afraid to ask questions. I think, and even when people are busy, of like, if they are, like, don't interrupt them. But there's gonna be an opportunity within a half an hour to ask them a question. Like, I just find that
Yeah.
a really lazy excuse, frankly. I know that may sound harsh, but because
They
people,
were busy.
but yeah, it being thorough. And so if there is specific direction, like get a receipt, it's like, don't just leave it in there. I'm like, it's gotta go to someone. So it's like, even if it
Yeah.
doesn't say, give to Michelle in the office, ask your superior, like, hey, I got the receipt, what's the next step? Or even, what do I do with this envelope? Like, there's gonna
Yeah.
be a place and
Yeah.
spot.
I would collect the envelopes from when I was gang boss, collect the envelopes from the set dressers, and like, all right, you guys didn't put your name on this. I need you to put your name on it. Come 3 weeks later, someone's gonna ask me about this and who picked it up. And I'm not gonna know. And I don't want to be responsible for it because I didn't pick it up. So I want you to make sure you put your name on it, and it's clear whose name's on it, date. Those envelopes they're the foundation of the art department and getting those tasks done. And it's written down, and our coordinator's taking the time to fill it out, and or the buyer's taking the time to fill it out. It's important that, the envelopes are organized in a way that's efficient for everyone, that everyone knows how to access them, which envelopes are rentals and which envelopes are purchases and assets. Another thing that should be dealt with before the end of the show.
Oh man, that is such a point of contention depending on who you talk to. Because I agree of like I like to at least have an idea of assets as we go. And so many, sorry, calling them out, buyers, decorators are like, I don't want to mess with it until the end of the show. And it's like, well, you have the least amount of wrap.
Yeah, because
From
sometimes it gets put on the set dressers as we're wrapping at the
oh,
end of the
totally.
show. It's like, oh, we've already wrapped, and now we have to go back and pull things out from pallets that have been wrapped away and label as an asset. And it's like, couldn't we have figured this out or done this along the way as opposed to like after the fact?
Yeah. Yeah, and I get, or at least when you're wrapping out the set, because then that way, it goes into,
Yeah.
the inventory aspect of it. And at the end, so for anyone that doesn't know, at the end of wrap, we have to identify where all the assets are. And an asset is, a certain value amount. Sometimes it's like, say, $250. A single item that's $250 is an asset. And then we have to identify it. And so for my part, as I'm entering stuff in to turn into accounting, I emphasize being really specific on the description. So don't call it a couch. Say it's a brown leather 3-seater couch, like, because then
Oh man.
we know what
I've
we're
gotten
talking
those asset lists, and then giving it to the Gangboss or a warehouse person. They're like, all right, here's the asset list. And like, these descriptions are just numbers sometimes because they come from the receipt.
it comes from whoever is turning in that receipt, whatever's on the top sheet. That's the description they use. And if
Yeah.
you don't separate out your assets when you're turning things in, then yeah, accounting will just be left to their own devices.
When I was a warehouse manager, I would try to make sure I like get pictures of things that I knew were going to be assets, like new television picture, So I have a folder of things that were going to be assets, so that later, at least know what it looks like. Because sometimes if it's an asset, you take a picture of it in a box, unfortunately, and then it gets taken out of the box, and that box gets thrown away, and then you're like, well, what does it look like again? Because you've got two other items that may look like it, and you're like, I guess we'll figure it out. And it normally gets figured out, but it's not the most. It's definitely not the most efficient way to go through that process.
Yeah.
And then some things are, coded wrong to wrong set, or say you had to buy a large number of pencils, and those pencils went over you know, the dollar amount of an asset. And it's like, well, I know it says these pencils are an asset, but those
Yeah.
pencils are no longer here. They've been used
Right.
and
And
they're
I think that's
everywhere.
where, yeah, like doing it as you go is helpful, because I mean you can challenge it on the back end of like, hey, this isn't an asset, because like them thinking it's a single item and it's not, like it's a grouping or something.
Yeah.
Um or if it's, yeah, something that's meant to be destroyed and is unavoidable to be destroyed, or something that sometimes stays at location, like construction gets acided for the weirdest things, like it'll be like like we'll buy like whole rolls of vinyl, and that can obviously be very expensive, but it's like, well, we put it on the building, so it's on the building. And
Yeah. Or it's a part of the set walls. They bought the whole roll of wallpaper, and most of it's been used. It's like, well, it's on the walls.
I hope studios honestly do away with assets, because it's like obviously we keep in keep in inventory of what we can keep and what will be available for reshoots, but it's like breaking stuff down to that degree is just like,
That's where things get lost in translation, as far as like people who ho- only see the numbers and the line items, and are unaware of the practicality of how things work on set. And it's like, I know you wanted that thing, but it doesn't exist anymore, or it's been destroyed, or it was destroyed on set on purpose. So I can't produce that item as an asset.
So with that, I feel like that's a great building block for, what have you learned within like your scope of working in set deck to better, better prepare yourself and have a good framework for, writing, directing, producing your own projects?
The biggest thing I've learned is making a decision and sticking with it. That is, out of everything to learn, is making decision and sticking with it. Nothing causes more problems than like either not making the decision or changing it halfway through, which causes a, which affects several departments along the way. So in being a writer director, like I want to be solidified on my decision making and what I'm expecting. I want to make that clear so that there isn't back and forth or indecision or waiting for an answer or anything like that. Which when that information is dispersed properly, everyone else can do their job and continue to do their job and less time is wasted. But when people are waiting on a decision, they literally are like, all right, well, I guess we'll do something else until we can do this thing. And then what ends up happening is you end up being rushed to do the thing that you've been waiting to do as opposed to taking your time to do it correctly. And rushing to do jobs always, well, eventually leads to something getting messed up or someone getting hurt, just something important being overlooked. And I definitely don't think that's the way to go. So that's the biggest thing I've learned is make a decision and stick with it. You're welcome to change your mind, but make sure when if you do that it is for a reason that is, and you're aware of the consequences down the line that it's gonna how it's gonna affect time, money, and that sort of thing. And I think working below the line, working in set dressing, basically I'm the last leg of the race at times before the crew shows up. So I see all those things that happen that could have been changed or decisions that could have been made before they got to me so that we could have done this and had it done way before it needed to be delivered to set or before it needed to be delivered to the crew. And so I push for that or at least practice that when I'm doing my own project. It's like I spend a lot of time just in my head or on paper and talking and getting those having those conversations with the other crew members to make sure that this is what's been decided on, this is what we're moving forth with.
Awesome. And can you speak to like any current projects you have going on? And if you have a link, go ahead and send it to me and I'll put it in the description below. But anything else you want to share of what you're working on and what your future future goals are as well?
Future goals are to tell stories of Atlanta. I feel like Atlanta is a huge resource for cultural stories, and I feel like with the influx of people to Atlanta to live, to for work or whatever it had be, that the city, the history of the city needs to be promoted a bit more, well, a lot more, so that it is not lost through gentrification or through an influx of people who have no connection to the cultural history of the city. I have a working, I guess, a business. It's called Preservation by Film, in which we honor and preserve buildings through filmmaking. So I'm creating stories that focus on parts of the city to honor their history and neighborhoods and their connection to others so that when you move to Atlanta, you can watch these films and understand why this is important to the city and to the residents so that you don't feel like an outsider. So you feel more connected to the history and know why it should be here. Because sometimes a whole neighborhood may be gentrified and then these certain buildings that are important get torn down and no one fights for them. Or there may be just physical tension between you and the neighborhood you just moved into.
Mm.
And when you understand who lived there, who's living there, and the stories that are there, you respect it more, and there's less of a us and them sort of vibe in moving to the city. So I'm focusing my efforts on that. People can follow me and this work through United Storytellers on Instagram, and that's where I put up a lot of this work and advertise about stories about Atlanta and other projects that are related that I know other filmmakers are doing. So I try to support their work and which also fuels my work.
I love that. I think that's a great thing to keep in mind as filmmakers, of not to view each other as competition, but to support one another, and see what is the shared mission that you're trying to accomplish. Like I really like that you also I actively identify that and help promote that, because yeah, it's like part of filmmaking is tell a story and then tell everyone about it.
Yeah.
The way that you're approaching gentrification, that's a hard one for me to say. Um, and I'm really curious to see, what's the final execution of that, because it's like, how do you overcome that ignorance obstacle of, getting that exposure in front of the people that are in those communities, those neighborhoods, or maybe people that aren't but have a certain viewpoint. So yeah, I'm super
Yeah.
curious to learn more about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's coming along. I've been working with the Russell Center of Innovation and Entrepreneurship to develop a business model for it, and I'm almost done with finalizing that. But have a few more weeks to really get that hammered out, and hopefully to be putting out some content about it. So.
That's exciting.
One thing I say is anyone getting into film, be humble, understand it's going to be a process of learning new things. And some things you may know, be humble about it because you may learn a different way in doing it that may be helpful. And ask questions when you are not clear. When we make assumptions about what needs to be done or how it needs to be done, or just assumptions between each other, that's where the conflict sort of really arises, and we can sort of tackle that by just having that conversation and asking that question and clarifying between the person you're talking with about it, so that you're both on the same playing field, that you're seeing things from the same viewpoint to execute it and work and film together, because it's a collaborative process, and with everybody understanding the vision, I think it's really helpful in collaborating, because when you don't, you may not there's a lot of tension that can arise from not understanding that and not understanding how people work.
Not only just being a director, but a department head. It's like it's a people industry, so understanding how people work, I think, is a big asset to that person to learn. Well, thank you, Cedric.
No problem.
Always
This is
awesome
awesome.
talking with you, and
You
I keep
too.
us, yeah, keep definitely we'll continue to keep each other updated, and thank you again.
Yeah.